Every day, we say we know things. We know our name, we know the capital of a country, we know how to ride a bike, and we know when a friend is upset. But the word knowledge is doing a lot of work in all of those examples. Sometimes it means possessing a fact. Sometimes it means having direct familiarity with a person, place, or situation. Sometimes it means being able to perform an action successfully. The ordinary word feels simple, but once we ask what makes knowledge different from a lucky guess, a strong opinion, or a useful habit, the idea becomes surprisingly difficult. This is why knowledge has been one of the central problems of philosophy for thousands of years. To understand it, we need to separate its major forms, examine where it comes from, and ask why knowing anything at all might be harder than it appears. One major kind of knowledge is descriptive knowledge, also called propositional knowledge. This is knowledge that something is the case. For example, water boils at a certain temperature under standard pressure, the Earth orbits the Sun, or a particular meeting starts at noon. These are claims that can be true or false. Philosophers often focus on this kind of knowledge because it can be analyzed as a relation between a person and a proposition. If someone says, "I know that the door is locked," we can ask whether the door really is locked, whether the person believes it is locked, and whether they have a good reason for that belief. Descriptive knowledge is the kind most closely connected to facts, evidence, science, and argument. It is also where some of the deepest puzzles appear, because not every true belief counts as knowledge. A second kind is knowledge by acquaintance. This is not mainly about stating facts, but about direct familiarity. You might know a city because you have walked its streets, not merely because you can recite information about it. You might know a person in a way that goes beyond listing their age, job, or biography. You recognize their mannerisms, moods, and patterns. This kind of knowledge matters because human life is not made only of abstract propositions. Much of what we understand comes from experience, contact, and lived familiarity. There is a difference between reading a restaurant review and actually eating there, between learning statistics about grief and personally knowing what grief feels like. Knowledge by acquaintance reminds us that knowing can be intimate and experiential, not just factual. A third kind is procedural knowledge, or knowing how. This is practical skill, knowing how to swim, solve an equation, play an instrument, cook a meal, or repair an engine. Procedural knowledge can exist even when someone struggles to explain it in words. A skilled cyclist does not consciously calculate balance, friction, and muscle movement while riding. They simply know how to do it. This raises an important point. Knowledge is not always the same as verbal explanation. Some knowledge lives in habits, trained perception, muscle memory, and repeated practice. A person may know all the theory of chess and still play badly, while an experienced player may instantly see a strong move without fully explaining the process. Knowing how is embodied, practiced, and often built through trial and correction. When philosophers analyze propositional knowledge, they often begin with three ingredients: belief, truth, and justification. If you know that it is raining, first, you must believe that it is raining. If you do not believe it, it would be strange to say you know it. Second, it must actually be true. If the sky is clear, your belief that it is raining is not knowledge, even if you are completely confident. Third, your belief must be justified. You need some appropriate basis for believing it. You saw rain through the window, heard it hitting the roof, or checked a reliable weather report. This traditional idea is often summarized as justified true belief. It captures an important distinction: knowledge is not merely being right. It is being right in the right kind of way. Justification is where the debate becomes intense. What counts as a good enough reason to believe something? Is seeing always enough, even though perception can mislead us? Is testimony enough, if the speaker is reliable? Do we need evidence we can consciously explain, or can a belief be justified by processes working in the background, like memory or trained recognition? These questions matter because many true beliefs are not knowledge. Imagine someone guesses a password randomly and happens to be correct. Their belief is true, but it is not knowledge because it lacks support. On the other hand, ordinary life does not demand absolute proof for every claim. We often know things through reasonable evidence, not perfect certainty. The challenge is explaining what kind of support turns belief into knowledge. In the 20th century, a famous challenge shook the traditional definition. These challenges are known as Gettier cases. They are thought experiments where someone has a belief that is justified and true, but still does not seem to count as knowledge. The basic pattern is this: a person forms a reasonable belief based on good evidence, but the belief becomes true because of luck rather than because the evidence connects properly to the truth. For example, someone might look at a stopped clock that happens to show the correct time by coincidence. They believe the time is 3 o'clock, it really is 3 o'clock, and they have a reason, the clock. But because the clock is broken, we hesitate to say they know the time. Gettier cases suggest that justified true belief may not be enough. Knowledge seems to require some stronger connection between belief and reality. So where does knowledge come from? One major source is perception. Through sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, we learn about the external world. We see cars approaching, hear voices, feel heat, and observe patterns in nature. Perception is the foundation of much everyday and scientific knowledge, but it is not infallible. Illusions, poor lighting, bias, and limited attention can distort what we take in. Another source is introspection, awareness of our own inner states. You may know that you are in pain, anxious, curious, or remembering something. This kind of knowledge seems unusually direct, but even introspection can be complicated. People can misunderstand their own motives or emotions. Both perception and introspection show that knowledge begins with experience, but experience still needs interpretation. Other sources of knowledge extend beyond immediate experience. Memory preserves what we learned before, allowing knowledge to endure across time. Rational intuition helps with things that seem knowable by reflection, such as basic logical or mathematical truths. Inference lets us move from what we already believe to new conclusions. If the streets are wet and clouds are dark, we may infer that it recently rained. Testimony is another enormous source. Much of what we know comes from other people, teachers, books, experts, witnesses, journalists, and communities. No individual personally verifies every historical fact, scientific result, or map. This makes knowledge social. It also creates dependence on trust, credibility, institutions, and methods for checking error. Human knowledge grows because people can share and preserve it. But once we rely on reasons, a new problem appears: what justifies the reasons themselves? Foundationalism answers that some beliefs are basic. They can justify other beliefs without needing support from further beliefs. For example, direct experiences, simple observations, or self-evident truths might serve as foundations. Coherentism rejects the idea of isolated foundations. It argues that beliefs are justified by fitting together within a larger web. A belief is stronger when it coheres with many other beliefs, experiences, and explanations. Infinitism offers a more radical view. Justification requires an infinite chain of supporting reasons. Each position tries to solve the same puzzle. If every belief needs another belief to support it, do we eventually reach a foundation, circle back into a coherent system, or continue endlessly? The field that studies these problems is epistemology. Epistemology asks what knowledge is, how it is acquired, what makes belief rational, and whether we can know anything with certainty. It also studies skepticism, the view that knowledge may be impossible or far more limited than we assume. Skeptical arguments often begin with a disturbing possibility: what if our senses deceive us, our memories are unreliable, or our entire experience is systematically mistaken? Most people do not live as skeptics, but skepticism is philosophically powerful because it pressures us to explain why our beliefs are trustworthy. Epistemology is not just abstract wordplay. It affects how we think about evidence, disagreement, expertise, education, misinformation, and the standards we use when deciding what to accept as true. Knowledge is also central outside philosophy. Science aims to produce knowledge through observation, measurement, repeatable experimentation, and careful testing. Its power comes partly from public methods that allow claims to be checked, challenged, and revised. Religions often treat knowledge as spiritually important, sometimes holding that the divine is a source of ultimate truth. Anthropology studies how different cultures acquire, store, retrieve, and communicate knowledge, from oral traditions to rituals to written archives. Sociology examines how social conditions shape what counts as knowledge, who is treated as an authority, and how institutions influence belief. History traces how bodies of knowledge develop over time. In every field, knowledge is not just information inside a mind. It is a human achievement, created, tested, transmitted, protected, and sometimes overturned. So, what is knowledge? It is not one simple thing. It can be factual awareness, direct familiarity, or practical ability. It usually involves truth, belief, and some form of justification, but even that formula faces difficult challenges. Knowledge comes from perception, introspection, memory, reason, inference, and testimony, yet each source can fail. Philosophers disagree about whether knowledge rests on foundations, coherence, endless support, or something else entirely. And still, knowledge remains one of the most valuable things humans pursue. It lets us navigate the world, build science, preserve culture, make decisions, and understand ourselves. The puzzle of knowledge matters because every claim we accept depends on it. Before asking what we know, we have to ask a deeper question: what would make knowing possible in the first place? If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.